Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks, a podcast that is future-proof as a phone book. It's Sif Pop. Welcome to Sif Pop Weekly, streaming live most weekends or available to download later in your podcast feed. Unless, of course, you're a patron.
Patrons get perks!
Patrons get those perks. I'm your host, Aaron Dicer, and he's not just the water, he's the ocean. It's Andrew Ormsby, ladies and gentlemen.
Ahoy!
Each week we'll chat about movies, television, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And please welcome our guest this week. He's running on a bunch of Pop-Tarts and 3 pots of coffee. It's John Negroni!
Woo! Ooh, hello. That is very accurate, actually.
You know, I thought it might be. Welcome back, John. It is good to have you here. John has been on the show before. He is an amazing Pixar expert, so we thought he'd have him in again as we talk about Soul and Wonder Woman 84. And you are also the host and creator of Cinemaholics, right? The podcast and the website, if you want to check that out. And also the author of a book about Pixar called The Pixar Theory. And I know we've talked about this before, but if you remember back to the idea of all the Pixar universes being intertwined, John is the one who kind of put that into the world and popularized it and wrote a book about it. And that's just one of those fun things that you will always have. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
I connected all the Pixar dots. That was me, guys.
It's not the most fun dinner table conversation because of all of the obvious heated arguments it generates. So
Sure,
I have to
yeah.
use it wisely, you know.
How has the Pixar theory aged? I didn't warn you about this question, but like as more and more Pixar movies come out, do you continue to do addendums, at least in your own mind, or like how like has the Pixar theory continued to grow with the movies since then?
I mean, it doesn't age like wine or anything like that, but I do think that it ages in a fun way. Like people still talk about it and come up with like amazing additions themselves, and it's always a thrill to read them. I actually like the book I wrote is currently in the middle of being re-released, so it's actually not available right now because we've kind of changed it up a bit, and it's going to have like new chapters and everything, but it's taking forever to get it out because of COVID. So sadly it's not available right now, but I'm excited. Like I'm going to be like going on the Pixar Theory campaign trail hopefully in 2021, and it's going to hopefully be as airtight as ever. Airtight in air quotes because it's never been airtight.
Yeah, whatever the case, however much air is or is not let in or out of the Pixar theory, it is certainly fun to think about and to discuss and to theorize on. And that, if nothing else, that's something really cool to have put into the world. You know, something that, you know, so many people have had fun thinking about, and it's really cool. And I'm really glad to have you back on, John. It's really good to have you here to talk about Soul and Wonder Woman 1984. And it was sure to be a completely uncontroversial episode with the opinions on these movies this week. So it's been interesting to watch the internet with movies that are available to everybody, right? Like this is a new thing with the kind of the pandemic era. And this kind of thing where big movies are coming out in theaters and in your homes at the same time. And an effect of that is really this populist takeover of discourse, which is really beautiful as far as I'm concerned. I think it's a good thing, but it's also a very, heated thing, can be. And so, to kind of see that with the Wonder Woman takes and the Soul takes, probably more the latter than the former. It's been an interesting kind of thing to see, and I think we'll see more of it. John, I'd love to pick your brain. Like, how are you feeling about like this evolution of the movie going experience and what it means? Like, how is that impacting you?
Well, I'll start by saying when it comes to the online discourse, my strategy for Soul and Wonder Woman 1984 has been to largely stay out of it because I have way better things to do and think about than, this cacophony of opinions and like who's a real critic and like all this boring stuff I don't really care about. In terms of like the streaming universe and how all that's been going, I actually started, I'm a sly plug here. I started a new YouTube live stream myself called The Big Stream, which I've been doing for Cinemaholics, where I've been going in depth on the HBO Max stuff, the Warner deal, what Sony is doing in response, the Disney Plus strategy, because I do think it's fascinating and it's shaping, I think, the future of movies in ways that we don't fully know what to do with yet, and the future is super uncertain. It's like equally exciting to equally terrifying for me in some ways, because there's a lot of great things that can come out of it. There's a lot of like moments like this where people can watch Soul and Wonder Woman in their living room where previously they might not have been able to do so financially with their families, but now they can share those moments ahead of time and not be spoiled on the experience like they would be if they had to wait months. But then the other side of that is that the theater business is in danger of going away forever, at least being altered in a way that it's not accessible to a lot of people who don't live in huge metropolitan areas. And so I worry about that as well, but I'm definitely not 100% cynical or anything like that. I think the future is exciting, and we just got to see it coming a little bit.
Yeah, I think we'll figure it out. I think at the end of the day, there are too many people who want to make... This is the same thing I say about kind of the IP culture that people lament as well, where it's like, where are the original ideas? Well, we're going to talk about one today, right? Like, they still happen, and the reason they still happen is because people still have them. And there will always be a place, and in fact, maybe even now more than ever, where people can find a way to enact their original ideas. The technology makes it easier than ever before. And so I'm not worried about the idea of like storytelling. Like, storytelling is always going to be a thing in some way or form. And there will always be fun, original stories for people to tell. But the economical the economical issues that come with evolution are real issues. Jobs that people have that will no longer have the ability to, invest as much money in kind of even those secondary jobs. A lot of times we think, well, it's just the people pulling down the big paychecks. And, there's an industry, right? And that industry has a lot of people. And if the money diminishes to that industry, how does it change the way movies are made? So like, those are things that are important to think about, I think. But overall, I think above my pay grade. Like, I don't know how to process a lot of that stuff. What I do know how to process is the idea of storytelling and what it means to me personally, and how I do not fear that the idea of storytelling is going away. What it's going to look like, I don't know. But I don't think that's, going away in any long-term sense. So it'll be an interesting 2021 as we head towards it. All right, well, let's talk about some movies, guys. Let's kick it off with Soul. Joe is a middle school band teacher whose life hasn't quite gone the way he expected. His true passion is jazz, and he's good. But when he travels to another realm to help someone find their passion, he soon discovers what it means to have soul. As mentioned, this debuted on Disney Plus on Christmas Day. I had watched a screener before that, but then watched it again with my family on Christmas Day. So I have seen it twice now. And this is Pixar's first Pixar movie straight to streaming, right? Like, I'm not. There hasn't been another one that's gone like straight to any kind of, like, Onward was pretty quick, but it wasn't
unintended,
Yeah. Well, what did you guys think? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? Andrew, why don't we start with you?
Oh, great. I thought it was okay.
Oh, flaming
see,
arrows.
he's trying to hide.
We still see you, Andrew. We still see. Hey, listen, this is a safe place. This is a safe place.
If to give context, if we were talking about like in our pre-show, we had like tiers and stuff like that. It would probably go on my C tier.
Okay. No, that's good clarification. Yeah, for our Sif Pop members show this week, if you are a Sif Pop member at Patreon, we did a Pixar tiers conversation where we each ranked the tiers of Pixar movies and what that looks like. I will go next. I'll let our guest go last. I don't think it's any surprise that I loved this movie. It is Pete Docter, who has my number. Inside Out is one of my top 10 movies of all time. And so he has, to me, done it again. And I was supremely impressed both times I watched this, even more the second time. It actually, I don't know how, but somehow it grew on me the second time I watched it. This is firmly in the transcendent masterpiece category for me. It is in my top 5 Pixar.
Wow.
I really, really loved this movie. John, what did you think?
Well, I'm sorry, Andrew. I have to tell you this, but I loved it as well. And, we have something in common there, Aaron, when I saw a screener for it a few days beforehand. So, like, the first watch, I guess, was kind of like you. I wasn't really, like, I didn't have, like, an impression of how this was going to go over. I didn't watch any trailers. I only watched the first teaser, and that was it. I didn't know what I was in for. And I've seen it twice now as well. And you are so right about the second viewing. It's even deeper and richer when you experience it the second time, kind of knowing the like bones of the plot and everything. So I came out of this similar to you. This is for me the first like transcendent masterpiece from Pixar since I think its golden run in the like early 2000s. I think that for me at least it outshines Inside Out. Like it definitely owes a lot to Inside Out, and I love that film as well. I think it's really great, but this movie has my number from like music to animation to story. It just hit me on every level.
Yeah, and I'm kind of trying to figure out where we want to start into kind of the further conversation of the movie. Let's start it here with let's start it with just kind of general feelings on what elevates this movie for you, John, and I'll let you kind of kick us off into this. Like, specifically, you mentioned a couple things specifically, but like as you prioritize the parts of this movie that like puts it in that transcendent level for you, what are they?
There's a bunch of things. One of the initial things is I love the unique perspective we get out of this. One of the things I've enjoyed about a lot of Pixar films is how they don't always center around children as the protagonists. Sometimes they're really more about like parental relationships. Even in Toy Story, the way Woody and Buzz are sort of like patriarchal figures for Andy, that resonates with the theme, and that's something that's pretty universal, even though they're toys. But then also movies like Finding Nemo and Incredibles, where I think Pixar has the boldness to focus stories on people who are middle-aged. So that was one of the first things, the idea that this is a black man in middle age in New York. It's a very specific thing, and it feels unique, and it feels amazing that Pixar was able to pull something like this off. It also feels very authentic to that experience, and I credit Kent Powers, the co-director and co-screenwriter, for really bringing this story to life and adding a personal touch. You can really tell that Joe Gardner, our main character, really feels like a considered, fully realized person. In fact, one of the few flaws I think somebody could throw at this movie is how his characterization is so much better than maybe some of the other characters, arguably, which I don't know if that might be something that Andrew would agree with. But the other component to this, I'll say real quick, is the jazz. And for me, I am a sucker for when a movie can take its music and just brilliantly weave it into the message. The idea of jazz is this improvisational, like you don't know what you're going to get out of the song, mirrors exactly what you don't know what you're going to get out of life. And just making a musician's story and telling it in this like funny and accessible and risky movie about like death and purpose is for me a home run.
I'm so glad you said that. That is by far the thing, if I were to answer that question, that elevates it for me, is thematically how consistent and beautiful and deep this movie is. And the idea of, and not only that it is, but it's also, the message is not controversial, but it is counterintuitive in some ways because, certainly our culture is one that thinks of purpose as being vocational, right? That thinks of, what you were made to do, what you're good at, and how you make a living, and what you're going to do with your life, and how those things interact. And this movie has the guts to say, yeah, but no. It's just like there's something very counterintuitive about this movie going, no, that's actually kind of wrong. Like the idea of your spark and your purpose aren't necessarily connected. Like that's a big idea in really kind of a countercultural one. And
it's anti-Western.
What's that? Say that again.
It's a little bit anti-Western. It's a little bit of Eastern philosophy mixed with Western philosophy, which is unique.
Yeah. And you're so right that the movie then, lays that message into the perfect avenue for it of jazz, which, again, like you said, the idea that improvisation, not knowing where it's going, what takes you there is not the same place that you end at, and all those things. And then to layer that into the character's journey in the way that it's layered in so beautifully, and kind of his perspective and his change and his evolution. So yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned it, because in people who, listen to me know this, but I mean, theme, message, those kind of things are always going to float the highest for me. And it's because of the resonance for me. And so, yeah, so this movie does that really, really well. Andrew, some thoughts. You have some positive thoughts, I'm sure, that you can share before you get into your negatives.
If you hadn't said them all.
Did we check off all your positives?
No, honestly, yeah, the best thing about this film is that jazz is improvisational and unpredictable, just like life. Thank you a lot for taking that from me. But no, it's not like it's a hidden secret. I mean, it's the main. I think it's the main message of the movie is that life is unpredictable. Life is not something you can have a plan, but don't always rely on that plan to come to fruition. You have to be able to adapt and evolve and stuff like that, and go with the flow. I mean, it's the perfect analogy. I know that some people can kind of tie in like jazz as soul music, and that this title has like a double meaning to it, a person's soul and soul music, sure, stuff like that. I think that for me, not only the message of the music is like my favorite thing, I think the music itself is my favorite thing in the movie. It's just a beautifully scored movie. It makes New York like come alive in a different way than, like I'd seen. Like, you can kind of tie jazz music to New York, but in an animated movie, that's something I never thought that I would really get. So, that's a really impressive. Well done, Pete.
Yeah, no, the music is great in it as well. Let's talk about some other factors that we haven't talked about yet. Let's talk about the humor in this movie. Did that work for you? Did it not work for you? I found myself smiling and laughing along in kind of typical Pixar fashion. The jokes are well placed and worked well for me. Did you guys have the same experience?
Sure, yeah. I will say that it's for me, it was funnier the second time because I was paying more attention to the jokes. I think in the first one I was still trying to figure this world out, so some of the jokes like kind of went over my head, or I didn't really pay attention, especially when you're in the U seminar part of the movie.
Yes,
and there are so many like sly gags that I just didn't really like. They just didn't register. My favorite characterization of the humor in this movie comes from the Double Toasted guys on YouTube. I think they said it perfectly, where they're like, it's not laugh out loud comedy, it's humorous. It's just a movie that has like humor weaved throughout the whole thing. It's not here to just make you gut laugh constantly.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it reminds me of what P. Doctor does so well in Inside Out is like this is well, is because he's dealing with philosophical, existential things. He can have philosophical and existential jokes, which are totally different kind of jokes than normally what you would think of in a movie. I think of an Inside Out of the facts and opinions box that gets, jumbled and, oh no, now I can't tell facts from opinions, like that whole thing. Like, that kind of subtle, fun, philosophical idea, you have more of a playground in something like this to play with. And so I totally agree. I think that's what you're hearing. What about you, Andrew?
Uh, I laughed out loud only at one joke, and it was a basketball joke as a hint. That's the only
That's a good
time I
one.
actually like laughed out loud. Other than that, I would like, I would just do the one lip
Sure.
raise. So, but I mean, not every single Pixar movie has to be a side-splitting, laugh fest. And I don't think Coco was a side-splitting laugh fest, and it's phenomenal movie. I was disappointed by some of the characters that I saw that I felt had potential to be like the real, like, because I know this character was meant only to be funny. Like the Graham Norton character, I'll just throw that out there. That character's only purpose really is to be funny, And I felt that it kind of fell flat, and I was disappointed because I could see that character being hilarious, and I was just like, oh, I wanted more from that one. But I think I felt that way about a bunch of characters in this one. Like, oh, I wanted more from that character.
Is that a
Or
story thing for you or a performance thing for you? Like, why do you
it's
think it
definitely
fell
not.
short?
It's definitely not a performance thing because that's why I knew like there was potential there. Like the way Graham Norton or Richard Ayoade was like whenever these people are delivering their lines, I'm like, oh man, if they just had the right line, they could really get me going and laughing. But I think the movie, rightly, I guess, was really focused on Joe's story as opposed to having characters make you laugh. But if you're going to focus on that, then you don't need so many characters. There's a lot of characters in this that I feel are just either underserved or useless.
It's interesting. I know I disagree, and I think the reason is I see those characters as spices, right? And the amount of spices you put in whatever the dish may be are important. And maybe that mix was off for you, but I felt like it wasn't like they didn't feel wasted to me. They felt like they played the role of adding those moments of levity or adding kind of expanding the idea of the world, doing some world building, those kind of things. I really liked the Soul Sorter character. I thought that was a lot of fun, and I liked kind of their back and forth and the way they played off each other.
That's actually the counter. That's the one that I had the most.
Oh, I was going to bring him
with.
up. Terry? What? I love Terry so
Yeah.
much. I love I love the Picasso design that they did for those like characters. But every time, especially on the second watch when Terry is like just hamming it up, he's like, I just love his expression. I love like how this movie, even though it doesn't really have a villain, it has him as the antagonist, but he's a funny antagonist without it feeling like too low stakes. I don't know. It worked for me for sure.
Another thing I really liked, and I don't think we're getting into too many plot details for this to be, too spoilery, but there's a mother-son relationship here that's an interesting one that I don't know that you often see, especially in movies like this, of a middle-aged man and his mom, and kind of the idea of her expectations, her, what she wants for her son. And it's set up in a way that we have seen before, but then paid off in a way we haven't. And I love when Pixar does that, where it's like this thing that you've seen be the antagonism to the story is kind of just a balance to this story, if that makes sense. So it allows a perspective that when you first hear it may seem like it is moving our protagonist in the incorrect direction, but then through a larger view you realize how balanced that perspective allows for the evolution of our character's journey. I really like those scenes. And I think Felicia, Rashad is a big reason for that. But yeah, I thought that was really well done as well.
It was weird because I was on the mother's side in like the first scene where she's introduced, but even though I was on her side and I was just kind of like, this is a great opportunity for you, Joe. Like this is the first part of the movie. I totally get though where Joe is coming from, and I totally get that like how he wants this thing so badly and he feels like it's an obstacle if he commits to something else. And the fact that I can be on one side but still respect and understand the other perspective is just really good writing. And real quick, I did want to mention, because we mentioned the soundtrack and everything, the Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross score that was kind of mentioned before. I don't know if you two have listened to the soundtrack by itself, but Oh my word. Anybody who's watching this and maybe is on the fence about Soul, check that out. It doesn't spoil anything of the movie, but like by itself, it is a terrific soundtrack of music for sure.
It is gorgeous, and so is a lot of the visual envisioning of this world and transitions between worlds and that kind of. I mean, it's just some really stunning animation, which you shouldn't be surprised coming from Pixar. We have gone this entire time and not mentioned the name Tina Fey, and Tina Fey plays a central character in this movie. Is that one of your negatives, Andrew? Like, it's interesting that we've gotten this far into the review and haven't even mentioned her.
No, I like Tina Fey. I think that her and Jamie Foxx play well off of each other. I didn't mean her whenever I was talking about, the other characters in the movie besides Joe.
Sure.
Just to give an analogy, if you look at Finding Nemo, there's a plethora of characters that you care about and add something to the story. You got Marlin, you got Dory, you got Nemo, all of these characters that come together and tell one story. Here, I really only felt a connection between Joe and Tina Fey. I'll just say Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey's character. Everybody else was there to serve them as opposed to being a character within themselves. I think Tina Fey is hilarious in this. She's great. It's hilarious in a amount, but I think that her and Jamie Foxx play well with each other.
Yeah, and I should be clear. It's not like we've mentioned Jamie Foxx's name yet either. So and maybe that's just a testament to the fact that they are their characters, which Pixar has this incredible history of perfect casting, and I think that continues here because honestly, I knew it was Jamie Foxx, but I didn't think of Jamie Foxx this entire movie. I thought of Joe.
Yeah.
And that is casting. That's voice casting. That's how you do it. Daveed Diggs pops in for a snack, and it's like that, and it's so perfect, and it's great casting. I do take issue, Andrew, because you mentioned Finding Nemo. That is, I mean, that's a two-hander. That is, Dory and Marlin. Nemo's got kind of his adventure in the tank or whatever, but that's, if you look at like Crush or like, Bruce, like that's kind of a lot of that movie are these secondary characters that just kind of come in for their moment and continue on. I think Pixar has a history of that.
Well, I mean, if you look at like Gil or who was
the Fish Tank Gang, yeah.
Well, not just the Fish Tank. I think Nigel, Gil, Nemo, Dory, and Marlin. That's 5 characters that I think play a very integral role to this, as opposed to being flavor, as you would say, for our main characters. Whereas I feel in this one, you only have 2 that you really, really care about, and the others are just kind of there. I'm not saying that there's not emotional moments, like the scene with Joe and his mom. That's an emotional moment, but I think that the mom character is really only there to serve Joe. I think a lot of the characters in this movie are either there to serve Joe or to serve Tina Fey. Like they're used to give you a backstory for him, like like Joe's students, or that I forget the name of the one girl who's his main student.
Connie.
She doesn't serve anything to the movie besides to give context for Joe.
I think it works though. I mean, and I do see that in other Pixar movies as well. So those Connie scenes were extremely moving to me, and I don't think she needed to be anything more than that. I mean, Joe is our protagonist, and the movie serves him, and I think that's the way it should be. Andrew, what are some other? Oh, go ahead. If you had further thoughts, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you guys. I think that Coco was it kind of dipped its toe in the afterlife and what that means for people, whereas this one definitely just jumps. I guess you could say jumps into the deep end. Do you think that some of this, the topics and the material, are something that would garner a talk with your children before or after watching this movie?
It's a good question.
Death is a very serious subject, and I'm not saying that Pixar isn't, shouldn't be allowed to talk about subjects, like this. I mean, more power to them. it's something new or something that we're being introduced to from them. Granted, Disney is no stranger to killing off
Yeah.
characters, especially parents.
I'm not a parent. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and thinking of myself as a kid, I never had any talks with my parents about death, honestly. Like, it's something that I feel like as a kid I came across through media, through Disney movies. And it wasn't something like, I feel like when you're at a certain age, like the existential dread of death doesn't really become a thing until you're slightly older. And then at that point, I think you already know what the deal is. So a movie like this that kind of makes light of it could go either way. It could make people sort of feel like a comfort almost in this subject matter. But it could also get people thinking about things they don't want to think about right now. So they have to push down. So I could see both sides of that.
Yeah, I would just echo what John said. I don't know that there's any big conversation to have if my kids were younger. All my kids are older now, but if they were younger, I would probably let them lead the conversation, and it would probably be after we watch the movie. That was kind of the way we process things, was after. I would obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, because all parents are different, but I would gatekeep on what we would watch. But then after we watched it, we would have the conversations about, wherever their mind went, because that's the thing, especially with younger kids, is they are sorting out reality from fiction. They're trying to figure it out. They're also built to emulate. They're built to imitate. And so, being able to process those things afterwards, that was just kind of our practice. So that would probably be the same with something like this,
I would add to, like, in terms of like what this movie is saying about the afterlife, I think it's like tastefully neutral. You can tell that they really put a lot of thought and care about how people of like various religious faiths would react to this, and how, because it would be so easy to offend somebody unintentionally. And I think in Pete Docter we trust, not to be glib about it. I think that he just has a really good handling of like, this is a way to approach this material that like is accessible for everybody, no matter where they're coming in from, that they can kind of get something out of this, even if they disagree, even if they look at the nature versus nurture aspect of it and they like, well, do you have a personality before you're born? I think you could still like get something out of this movie, even if you don't agree with some of its like premises, I suppose.
Right.
And
Yeah, because they all serve a story. This isn't an educational textbook that Pete Docter is putting out. It's not saying this is what heaven is like, or this is what a soul is like. This is, in the same way that Inside Out wasn't, meant to be a psychological textbook. It was meant to be a story using an idea, and I think he's doing the same thing here. So yeah, I think it's handled pretty well.
Can we talk about negatives now?
Yeah. Yes, Andrew. Go ahead and make up some negatives that don't really exist. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think the ending of this movie is a cheap out. I really do.
A cop out?
Yeah, it's a cop out. I don't think it's fair, really. And I think that's, but my big negative is something you literally just mentioned with the personalities being born with and stuff. The main driving force of this movie we talked about earlier on is the fact that, it's jazz, it's improvisational. It has so many, evolutions and branches off in different ways. Yet they introduce elements in this movie that feel a little fatalistic, with traits of who you are going to end up being like. I'm like, well, that's kind of counterintuitive to the improvisational and the I guess free will element to what I thought the movie was trying to tell me.
I definitely disagree. I think it's very compatible in my opinion. I think that what it's saying about personality is, first of all, it is something that is established in psychology, that we are born with like a temperament. I could see like maybe because Pixar is making jokes of it, it's like it's so specifically laid out, like the types of like personality is like, I am, a megalomaniac who is aloof or whatever. But I think what the movie's trying to say is like you do start with something. You start with like a set, or you start with like a predisposition, but then that's where the improv kicks in. And like that's something I do like, that it's not simplifying, like everybody just starts with like a clean slate, because I don't for me at least, that doesn't ring true. I think that I was born and I didn't have control over a lot of things. I was nurtured, and there are things that can change and alter and morph your personality. And I like how Soul starts a really cool conversation about, well, what really makes you you? Is it, the stuff that you were before you were born? Is it the stuff after? Is it the stuff that comes your way and how you interact with it? And I like that the movie, I get that it could, some people would look at it as a cop out, not referring to the ending, but, I definitely see it as like, it is a really mysterious mix of all of that. And I like the honesty in that it's not trying to say it's just one thing. I don't think the movie is saying that you're just born with this like spark. I think it's actually saying the opposite of that. But I guess it sounds like you're saying that that's a contradiction. Because
it felt it felt a little contradictory to me.
I get that.
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from. I do agree with John. I had one more thing to say, and then we can kind of wrap up if you guys have anything else that you that you kind of want to hit. But the one other thing that I wanted to mention, this movie does several things that I found meaningful and moving, and there is a visualization of the idea of I don't want to just say anxiety, because it's more than anxiety. I'll just say the lost soul idea in this movie was really moving to me, and especially the way the movie decided to connect the idea of being in the zone to the idea of a lost soul, as the movie calls it. And that was, I love it when a movie can present something to me and I go, I genuinely have never thought of that before. And to connect those two things feels so real to me. That feels like a very real connection. And I love when a movie can do that. And I just wanted to give the movie props for that particular one, because that one really, really hit me in that way. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I agree. Yeah. As somebody who suffers from anxiety, it rang true. So, yeah.
The only other thing I want to say is that, I kind of mentioned before, this is a movie that, centers around a middle-aged person. And I even saw like there were some comments and stuff about, is this a movie that's really aimed toward kids? And it isn't really. It to me, it does feel like a movie that is more for adults. But what I like about that is that I think kids like that kind of thing when they're watching things that aren't pandering to them. So at least that's how I felt as a kid. And I think that's how like my nieces and nephews respond to things. They tend to gravitate more toward things that aren't supposed to be for them, and the Soul is kind of like a Trojan horse in some ways, because it kind of presents itself as one thing. But for me, at least, like, I'm not middle-aged. I just turned 30, and I'm in a stage of my life where I'm starting to think more about what life is going to be like when I get to that stage. And, this movie was something that clicked for me with my anxieties of like, am I making decisions right now that are going to make my life better or worse when I get to a different age, when I get to the point where, I'm going to have to start reflecting on my future. And Soul was just zen for me. It really was. Like, it moved me like no other Pixar movie has in a long time, because it got me to like relax a little bit and like focus and dig in on the everyday moments. And that is such an important message. And I think that's why I'm at like the full on loved it, because like if somebody like me who's in between, this movie's like main demographics, if I can get that much out of it, I think that it's just such a cherished thing for a lot of people. So that's why I definitely want to champion this one.
Nice. And that's, I think, a good way to move us on to the next review. We are going to talk about Wonder Woman 1984. Diana Prince lives quietly among mortals in the vibrant, sleek 1980s. Is that what the 1980s were? Vibrant and sleek? An era of excess driven by the pursuit of having it all. Though she's come into her full power, she maintains a low profile by curating ancient artifacts and only performing heroic acts incognito. But soon, Diana will have to muster all of her strength, wisdom, and courage as she finds herself squaring off against Maxwell Lord and the Cheetah, a villainess who possesses superhuman strength and agility. Okay, guys, let's talk about World War 84. Oh, wait, that's not what the W stands for. Let's start here.
We have John, who's a Pixar aficionado, and me, who's a DC aficionado.
There you go. That's right. You're a big DC guy, so yeah, you'll have a lot of good insights to this, and I look forward to hearing them. But let's start here. Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay? John, why don't you start us on this one?
I liked it. And
Nice.
whenever I get a movie that does not feel like all the other superhero movies, I just have such an easy time not caring about the problems. And sure, like after the fact, I've been like, yeah, that was weird. Yeah, that was weird too. But as I was watching this, and to be clear, I just watched this yesterday. So like I watched it after the like every opinion under the sun kind of got blasted about it.
Right, yeah.
I just found myself being super into it and really appreciating these like huge swings. And for me, most of the swings basically landed. So I came away from it being like, yeah, I like that. I might even like it more than the first one.
I had saw you tweeted that, and I was very excited to make sure we had at least one voice on the positive side of this movie. Not to tip my hand, but Andrew,
Well,
what
why
did
don't you
think?
go ahead? Why don't you go ahead, Aaron?
Sure. I am so close to saying I hated this movie, and I very rarely do that. And I'm not going to. I'm going to be on the low side of disliked it, and there's a very specific reason that we will get into as to why I refuse to say I hated this movie. What did you think, Andrew? Like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or was just okay?
I am on the high side of disliked it.
Okay.
I'm pretty close to okay, but I'm going to go with I disliked it.
I guess I'll just explain what I was talking about, and then we can kind of get into some of the positives of this movie.
Erupt with rage, Aaron.
That probably won't happen till the spoiler cast, because there are just all these specific moments I just need to digest with you two and understand if the movie is really doing what I think it's doing. But I think overall what I can say is I was expecting a modern superhero movie set in the 1980s. I was not expecting an actual movie made in the 1980s.
Yes.
I wasn't expecting it to go, not only are we going to play with the era, we're going to play with the meta-ness of the 80s movie and cheesy villains and, all that kind of stuff.
That's my main negative.
Well, and I think from what I'm parsing from others who, love or dislike the movie, I think whether or not you're willing to go with it is the primary thing here. And if you're willing to embrace what I see as a really idiotic goofball nature of this movie, then, maybe that's how you have a good time. I just couldn't do it. I was like,
No.
There's a reason we've evolved past this kind of cheeseball one-liner 80s action film kind of thing. So, but I do want to talk about the good stuff first. And John, since you liked it the most, tell us what you specifically enjoyed about it.
Well, I do want to be clear that, being different just for the sake of being different is not enough. If this film was only, trying to do things that other superhero movies just don't do or, bother trying, then, it could still be a total misfire. And a good example is that's how I felt with Batman versus Superman. Like, yes, it was definitely trying something different there. But for me, that just did not work at any level. But on the opposite spectrum, I think this movie is being different, and it's being different in a way that for me was completely successful. Because as I was watching this, so many things kept happening that I wasn't expecting that just felt refreshing, I guess. Specifically, like the motivations of our main villain and the fact that he comes across this sort of MacGuffin sort of thing that I won't give away that is very goofy, it's very cheesy, but he's actually kind of smart and clever about it. And the mechanics of how that works, it makes for a type of story that is so just different. It's like our main character, for example, just can't punch her way to a solution. She has to actually think on her feet. And he has like a set of powers that do have understandable limits, but are also very devastating. And even though there are some things in here that don't go to their full potential, which is my main criticism, particularly Gal Gadot's acting, I just found myself being like, I'm going to remember this. Like, I remember the mechanics of this story. It's not so samey. Like, I don't feel like I'm watching a movie that, is just trying to be another Marvel film that is like kind of a generic bad guy that I'm never going to think about again. but it actually is like building up characters that make sense to me, that are likable. And this movie absolutely 100% is drunk on cheese, and I enjoyed watching it be drunk on cheese.
There you go. There you go. Andrew, what are some of your initial thoughts?
Uh, my biggest pro for the movie is Pedro Pascal. I think his acting is superb in this. His acting is great. The actual writing for his character, it leaves a little to be desired, but for what he's given, he is really trying to push, of what he wants me to feel, and it worked for a lot of the times. I do agree that Gal Gadot's acting is a little lacking in this. Trying to think.
Can I say something about that?
Trying to think of positives. Go ahead.
I heard something and now I can't quit thinking about it. I heard someone compare Gal to Arnold of the 80s.
Yeah,
and I cannot get that out of my head. Yeah. And I think there's some legitimacy there, and that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be like a horrible thing. Because, by the way, we've talked about it before on the show. Arnold is a decent actor. He really has moments where he can do stuff, and I think Gal's the same way. But there is something about the actionness, the delivery, and I could not. And I watched this twice as well. I watched this with a screener, and then watched it once it was in its full glory. And now that HBO Max has 4K HDR and all that fun stuff. And we should mention the stream also had the IMAX a couple times throughout. But yeah, as I'm watching it the second time, I'm just like, man, I think that's right. I think that Arnold comparison actually works, because there is something about the performance that's just very action hero, paper doll kind of idea. And yeah.
I want to throw this out there, and it is kind of a negative, but it's going to tie into what you just said. I think that this movie does a disservice to the first Wonder Woman movie in the sense that it's so jarring, the stylization and the type of movie it's trying to be from the first one, that there's no real good transition from Wonder Woman to Wonder Woman 84. Like the Wonder Woman had me crying in the theaters whenever she walked into No Man's Land. Like, it was just so powerful and emotional. And to see her immediately in the next movie doing some Paul Blart Mall Cop stuff is just so like
awesome.
It's like you can't do that to the same characters. Like, you can't Weekend at Bernie's something. It's just it felt wrong, and it felt like if you wanted to do this, I don't know how they could have done it to where it would have worked, but it didn't work. I think it's
almost half measures. Half measures are doomed to fail. And there are moments where a show, there was a Room 104 episode that was like cheesy 80s sitcom episode, and it went all out. Like, it really was, and this movie.
But that's an anthology.
Totally. I know. That's what I'm saying. And so this movie is handcuffed by the fact that it's part of a greater IP, but that it also wants to be, I think, and again, I'm assuming this just because I can't imagine any other way to explain what this movie does, is intentionally trying to do that. It's intentionally trying to be, I really believe that. I believe this was all intentional. I don't think this flew over anybody's head. Like, I think all the cheese, all all that stuff was very purposeful, and I just think it's hard to do. I agree with you. I feel the same way you do. But I know there are many that feel the same way John does, and I'm glad he's here to verbalize it, which is, give yourself to the cheese. Let the cheese envelop you and have a good time. And I just I was unable to do that either time I watched it.
If I could be more specific, some of the things that did work for me, because it's not like I'm disagreeing with, I think a lot of these criticisms are absolutely valid. There are plenty of things that, particularly the transition from the first movie to the second movie. But one thing that I do, cherish about this one over the first is I found so much love and care put into how Wonder Woman uses her powers. At the same time, there's way too much time in between when she's using her powers or when she's actually wearing the costume. That was a super weird choice because there's so much setup. But when we do get her as Wonder Woman, terrible visual effects aside in some cases, I just found myself really clicking with what type of hero she is. It's very different. I was thinking about how like the way she uses her lasso creatively, the action scenes. There's a reason in the first Wonder Woman, that movie kind of let me down because outside of the no man's land sequence, which is like triumphant, everything else about that kind of just felt flat to me. Like I think like the villain, the third act, it all just felt very like, I don't know, like not memorable, or like I didn't really care what was happening. I never felt like these characters were in danger. But in this movie, holy cow, like the chaos energy of that third act is just over the top, and I just was clicking so much with like, well, what's gonna happen? And even though there are things that happened that made no sense whatsoever, and even though I think that overall Cheetah is completely like total misfire by the very end, I think a lot of what leads up to that is pretty great, and particularly Pedro Pascal stealing the show.
Well, and I think the cheetah thing is a great point to bring up here, because it's almost like the movie wants to have its icing only cake and eat it too. Like it wants to still have the superheroes punch each other, same versus same thing, and also want to do this different thing with Pedro Pascal. Like it wants to do both, and because of that, the cheetah thing just feels so forced and out of nowhere and ridiculous. And
but Krista Wiig is good.
She's great.
She's good.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, she's one.
I just want to make sure we get that clarification. We're not saying it's her fault.
And Chris Pine is wonderful too, but I mean, like, he only exists here as a, starting with, for me, feels like starting with what you want and then trying to build something around it. And instead of starting with, a story and then putting the pieces together the way that work the best. And I just, to me, that's the movie failed for me on the tone. I could not buy into it, but I get that some people could. But it also failed for me just on storytelling. Like there's just some really, in my opinion, poor storytelling going on here. And so for me, it's kind of a 1-2 punch of I cannot find my way into this movie.
You mentioned two things I really want to talk about.
Sure.
One is I'll just talk about this one first because it's fairly quick. How this movie really tries to shove in things to get the DC fans going, like forcefully putting elements of the Wonder Woman franchise in a movie is just so sloppily and pointlessly done. I was just
so
like
goofy.
Like you don't need this element of the one. You're only putting it in just so you go, look what we did, that kind of thing. But the other main thing that you just brought up, and I don't mean to keep drawing comparisons between the first movie and this movie, but in the first movie you had the Wonder Woman's not just her reaction to the 1920s or the 1910s. That's not really what it was. Her reaction was to, the volatility and chaotic nature of mankind. That's what her reaction was towards. It wasn't the time. In this movie, it feels like it's just, look how goofy the 80s were. And there's a lot of look how goofy the 80s were, which doesn't progress the story. In Wonder Woman, the progression of the story tied itself into how, evil mankind can be to one another. That's what the driving force of the story was. How goofy the 80s were does nothing for this movie other than to add like, oh, okay, so that's what that was. And then you have to have the fish out of water element coming back again, forcefully. I think that fish out of water element, just that entire part of it, hated.
I would slightly disagree, because I think that what I like is that they don't dwell on the fish out of water thing with Chris Pine. So this is my read of the movie. Totally fair if anybody is like, you're reading way too much into it. But what I get out of the 80s setting and Chris Pine's reaction to it and how that ties into the overall message is that you have these characters feeling like, I want more, more, more. And the 80s were about excess in a lot of ways. And so you have this character, you have Steve Trevor coming into this era and being like, this is amazing. Like, we are, like, so many things have advanced. Like, the quality of life has gotten better. It's so colorful. Look at all these cool outfits I can wear, and it's acceptable that I can wear. This is awesome. But then every other character who's in this time doesn't appreciate it. They're kind of like, well, I want this. I wish for this. I want this, and I need more. And that to me is the message. It's not as deep as like Soul, which is kind of a similar message in some ways. It's like, appreciate what you have. But I do think that it does relate. I think that is connective tissue. It did. For sure.
I'm going to jump off on that for one positive thing I have left to say, and then I also have one negative thing left to say, and then I'm closing shop until the spoiler cast, at which point I will unleash fury, or something thereof. The positive thing that jumps off what you were saying is I actually like the message and theme of this movie. I actually think my problem with the theme is I don't think it's well presented. Like I don't think it's well, and maybe that's part of it too, but I think it's too subtle, if that's a thing, because there's a reason they open the movie with the scene that they open the movie with, because Diana is learning a lesson, and that lesson is about what this movie is about. It's about the idea that something that is earned unfairly is not truly earned. And I think that is the theme of this movie. And I think the movie does go there in many different ways. And it is the ultimate battle between the Pedro Pascal character and her comes down to that idea. The whole structure of this artifact and what it does comes down to that idea. So like it really is fairly consistent, and I did like that, and I think it was valuable to explore that. I don't know that the movie clears that up enough. I don't know that there's a lot of clarity in that theme, but I do think it is there, and I really did appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and hold the negatives until the spoiler cast, and we'll get into more of it there. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to mention about this movie as we wrap up?
There's a mid-credit scene, but you can skip it.
It's just so like pandering.
It's everything this movie.
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it's everything this movie is, and yeah, it's just
ill,
out
though.
of nowhere. Yeah.
I say let it be. I mean, look, I'm just very forgiving, I guess, with this movie because
Sure.
it earns a lot of goodwill with me, not unfairly. And it makes me a little bit sad and bummed out that people are responding to it the way they are. But I think this, for me, will go down as a movie that I definitely want to watch it again. And I definitely appreciate it so much. And it makes me a little sad that, like, it's not clicking with people and, like, it's not their fault or anything. I want stuff like this to be rewarded when, directors and screenwriters just really try something different or they try to break the formula a bit. Clearly, it's not working for a lot of people, but I'm glad that it worked for me. I'm a little sad that it could maybe deter creative movies moving forward. Hopefully it doesn't. We can hope for the best. Wish for the best.
Andrew, any final thoughts?
No. DC has a plethora of amazing stories they've told over this almost a century now. You don't have to make one up that's not good. Use one of the good ones.
Fair enough. There are thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984. Before we get into our best ever challenge for today, a reminder that if you would like to support what goes on here, you can do that at Patreon. Patreon.com/ShiftPop. Have previously mentioned that our members-only pre-show for this episode was us ranking our Pixar tiers. So if you want to check that out as a SIF Pop member, you can do so. And if you are not yet a SIF Pop member, thank you for even considering it. Just go to the website, check it out, see if it looks interesting to you. And if you want to throw a couple bucks our way so we can keep doing this thing, it would mean the world to us. Patreon.com/SiftPop is where you go for that. All right, let's move on to the best ever challenge. And we had nice full conversations on the movies. And now we get to go into an interesting place. Movies set in the 80s, but not filmed in the 80s. So either looks back at the 80s or looks forward at what the 1980s might be. Although looking at mine, I don't think I have any looking forward movies. Did you guys have any?
I looked for one that was looking forward, but I didn't find one.
I mean, you've got George Orwell's 1984, which is an obvious, option. I just didn't have it. So we'll go from number 5 to number 1. As always, if somebody mentions a movie that you have higher, you can trumpet, and we can talk about it at its highest ranking for someone. All right, we'll start with number 5 and guest first. John, what is your number 5 movie set in the 80s but not filmed in the 80s?
My number 5 movie is a very unconventional one for sure. It is Kung Fury, which you can watch on
Oh
Netflix.
man, that was my first honorable mention.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. This is the David Sandberg. He wrote, directed, and stars in it. His wild 80s just tribute. Is there a stronger word for tribute? I hope.
Homage.
Just a beautiful homage to the 1980s action movie aesthetic, specifically like martial arts and like action
That
heroes, like
synthwave
police
element.
action heroes. This movie is such a gift. I mean, it was crowdfunded. It's so unique in that sense. It is technically Swedish, but it's English language, and it's a short thing. But like every moment of it, it just for me reeks of an era that I didn't live in the 80s. I was born in 1990. I don't know nothing about what was going on in that decade. But it's movies like
missed
Kung
out.
Fury that tell me this is what it was pretty literally. I think so. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I was there. It was just like this.
Yeah.
The 80s are my growing up. Like I was born in 75, so like 80s are 5 to 15. Like that is, growing up era. So yeah, I can tell you this is exactly what the 80s were like. Kung Fury. It's
John,
pretty
if
much
you
Good to know.
documentary.
yeah. If you don't know, John, I got some good news for you. They're making a feature-length film of Kung Fury
I've
with
heard.
Michael Fassbender and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
So exciting. I hope it's
Oh,
amazing.
I'm not gonna lie. The David Hasselhoff True Survivor song from this little short is insanely catchy. It's
Oh, it
so
really is.
good.
It's so funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Andrew, what do you got at number 5?
This movie doesn't really have a set like era that it took place in, but it's hinted that this is when it takes place. I'm gonna go with Joker.
Oh.
It's said that it takes place in either the late 70s, early 80s. So
I always forget how much you love Joker. I always
Yeah.
forget that. And then you bring it up and like, oh yeah, he really likes that
I
movie.
really like Joker. It's not a top 100 movie.
Yeah.
But Joaquin Phoenix gives a top 5 greatest performances of all time in this movie.
You're allowed to
I
believe
think-
that. That's fine.
I mean, yeah, obviously, I'm never wrong. But I think that this movie is a unique and interesting way, kind of not in the same vein as Killing Joke, but it's an interesting way to give a non-canon origin story for a character. Just like, hey, we just want to tell what we think is a good story that doesn't have to have a hero and that doesn't have to have a positive outcome. I know it's not your classic, style of telling a story where you have a good guy and then things can work out in the end. No, you don't have a good guy and nothing good happens in this movie. It's kind of like The Road, except you at least root for the dad and the son in The Road,
Yeah.
But I think that the visual, the cinematography, the score, and the acting in this movie are bar none some of the best.
Nice. My number 5 is Hot Rod. This is the Andy Samberg comedy. I think this is a fairly overlooked comedy, and
It is.
It's one I wish people would go back to more because if you love Andy Samberg, everything you love about him is here. The sense of humor is very unique to him and feels very fun, and I think he really developed it obviously on SNL and even a little bit before that. But then it's just here in movie form kind of for the first time. And I'd recommend if you haven't seen it, check it out. I think you'll laugh quite a bit. If you have seen it and don't remember much about it, maybe revisit it because I think it's aged really well. That's interesting to say. But I think as his humor has become a little more mainstream, kind of that type of humor, you go back and watch something like this and it feels, even more perfect. So yeah, Hot
I
Rod.
definitely agree with that. Yeah. I almost included this one. It was close.
It's so
All right,
funny.
number 4 is John. What do you got?
All right, for my number 4, I have something totally different genre than I think anything we talked about, and that is Mandy, the 2018 horror. It's like a psychedelic horror film. Love this movie. It is
too.
it's absolutely haunting. I still think about it all the time. Panos Cosmatos did this one, and this just everything from the aesthetic to that it obviously takes place in the 80s, I think like 1983, but it's like Nicolas Cage, and it's just metal. It's metal and it's trippy, and it just makes me feel everything. You know, it makes me feel like regret and pain and love, and the action in this and the character designs are just. It's not for the faint of heart. So if you haven't seen Mandy yet, or you know if you've been kind of on the fence about it, I think it's so worth like the sit. But it is a tough movie to watch. It's a movie I've only seen once. I don't know if I could see it again. I'd have to like prepare myself, but I'm sure it'd be a cool experience.
I'm so with you on the part that it makes you feel pain and regret. Other than that,
yeah.
I hated watching this movie. I hated everything about the experience, but I will not begrudge those who enjoy it.
I love it, but I think I love it for a different reason than what John does. I love it for the simple fact that it's let's let Nick Cage go full Nick Cage, you know? So there's kind of a kind of a MST3K element that I love about it. Like, oh, I just want to see Nick Cage go crazy and I can laugh about it. Yeah, there's parts of this movie that are just really rough to watch, but like that second half when he like just makes that wicked metal axe, you know, like that is straight up out of like a 1980s comic book. And he just goes crazy. I'm like, I just want to see Nick Cage go full cokehead, you know? And
you know, John, knowing that you like Mandy this much explains so much of why you like Wonder Woman 1984. You know, it's all very
so
connected. It's just
that's all it is.
You're nostalgic for an era you missed.
Sure.
All right, Andrew, what's your number 4?
Number 4, this is where I have American Psycho.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, this is when I first realized that Christian Bale was going to be a phenomenal actor, because those scenes where how he can just so quickly transition between being that savoir-faire, like Wall Street, you know, everything's is on airs, and then just go into a completely dark, cold, uncaring creature, really. Like when he's talking about Phil Collins and stuff, while he has Jared Leto sitting on the couch and he's like laying down newspapers, and he's wearing that plastic raincoat, and he's just like, it is a raincoat. Is that an axe? It is an axe. And it's such a crazy movie. To this day, it's fun going online and reading the comments and the theories of what the meaning is for the ending of this movie, like what it all means and stuff. And I like a movie that has an ambiguous ending and leaves itself up to interpretation and discussion. Yeah, it's again not like Mandy, not for the faint of heart.
It's a shame it took you that long to realize Christian Bale was a great actor. I mean, obviously we all knew at Newsies and Swing Kids.
For sure.
So yeah. All right, my number 4. This is where I have Napoleon Dynamite, which
I didn't know that was set in the 80s.
Isn't not set in the 80s. I guess
I just thought.
Well, to give this away, I have Napoleon Dynamite for mine too, the next one. So I considered it 80s.
There you go.
All right, so it's your number 3, right? So that would be what we would talk about next anyway. So we can go ahead and talk about it now. I'll let you go ahead and talk about it since you have it a little bit higher. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the next one I was going to do. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your Napoleon.
No,
Dynamite
that's how it
thunder.
works. You trumped it, man. It's all you.
Oh my gosh, this movie so formative for me. It came out when I was like 13, so like I was the perfect age for this type of humor, and like I did not see this movie coming. Like, you know, just like anybody else, it was like another like Nickelodeon movie, but just like the humor of it, the like throwback, you know, nature. You know, at the time, it felt more like a 90s sort of setting for me, because it kind of harkened back to just that like that part of the era. I think it's like supposed to be late 80s based on like the musical choices, but yeah.
Well,
it's
I'm
just
looking
so
at it
simple.
now. I'm looking at it now. I guess technically the movie
place
is set
in
in
2004.
2004, which is ridiculous.
A
Like
lie.
that is a lie. But it says, however, the film contains several anachronisms indicating that it would be more appropriately set in the 80s or maybe 90s. So it kind of exists
Maybe.
outside of time in that way. So we'll count it.
We'll say it's timeless, so it's set in every time, you know, consequent or whatever the word is. Like,
Yeah.
all at
I'm
once.
not faulting you guys for picking it. I mean, there's so much about it that screams 80s. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. All right, Andrew. I think we're on to your number 3.
Now, number 3, this is where I have Silence of the Lambs. Starting from 3, or actually from 4, I guess the top 4 are all movies in my top 100 movies of all time. Silence of the Lambs. Everything you've heard about it is true.
Fair enough. That'll do it. That'll do it.
Yeah.
I did not realize that. I did not think about Silence of the Lambs being set in the 80s. So yeah. Good call.
I might be cheating because the books take place in the 80s, but the movie was like filmed in the 90s, so I don't know if it was like they update, because sometimes the movies will update like the source material. But
well, you gave us Napoleon
Yeah.
Dynamite, so we'll give you Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
all right,
It's
thank
kind of
you.
like Girl with Dragon Tattoo a little bit there too, right? Because that's technically
true.
90s. Harry Potter is like that. It's technically 90s, but
Yeah.
not really,
Yeah.
I guess.
All right, so I think that brings us to my number 3. I have Atomic Blonde at number 3. I really like this movie quite a bit.
Yeah, you're right. That's some Cold War stuff or post-Cold War stuff.
Yeah. And again, it maybe exists outside of time a little bit. I don't know that the year is ever specifically mentioned, but it is definitely the Cold War idea, the idea of the 80s. There's some music and colors and those kind of things that would imply that as well. This movie, every time I've watched it, I've enjoyed it more. And I think it really introduced us to kind of a path that Charlize wanted to go on that I've really enjoyed too. Atomic Blonde is I remember watching it at the time just going, oh, this is how you make an action movie that doesn't pander to having a female action star. This is how you make just a great action movie and a female happens to be the lead.
Yeah, they filmed her quote unquote like a guy.
They really did. Yeah, they absolutely filmed this movie in the same way. The camera isn't. Doesn't treat her differently than it would treat a man. And I really thought that was powerful and impressive. And I've really kind of liked, I pretty much liked everything Charlize has done, even before or since then. But yeah, this is a good one. So that's my number 3.
Yep.
All right, on to number 2s. John, what do you got?
All right, number 2. Okay. This is a pretty classic one, and it might be a little bit of it. I guess some people could look at it as a cheat because it's like an alternate 1980s, but we did come
like
Fury, so this should be fine. Watchmen. Watchmen is just like, we were talking about like Cold War stuff. This one definitely goes all in on that, and I almost considered like looping in the TV show because I think the TV show is like, way better. But I am definitely like an apologist for Watchmen. We've talked about Zack Snyder a couple times, I guess, like indirectly because of the Wonder Woman thing. But this is probably my favorite thing he's ever done. I just think that it's so just epic and lavish to the source material without feeling like, there's a lot of stuff they cut out, but like I think there were a lot of really smart decisions they made to sort of make this thing really work in a theatrical setting. And I did see it in the theater, and this is another film I saw like just the right time. I was like 19 years old, so like I was full edgelord status, and I came into this movie. Actually, I had never read the comic before I saw it the first time, so I didn't know what was going on, but I was taken on an incredible journey, and I'll never forget it. And as I've rewatched it, I actually do think it really holds up. It's not like a masterpiece, it's not like one of the greatest superhero movies ever done, but it definitely for me is one of the ones I appreciate the most.
I definitely haven't rewatched it. I did not like it when I saw it the first time, but that was a long time ago. And, my movie viewing has definitely changed since then. So I might need to revisit it. If it's your favorite Zack Snyder, I can only assume you've never seen The Legend of Guardians of the Owls of Ga'Hoole.
I do. That's probably my number 2. I do really
I'm not
like that
kidding. It's
movie.
a really good movie.
It is.
And
Such a good
people
popcorn
forget
flick.
That Zack did that one. So, yeah.
I gotta be honest. I have rewatched Watchmen a whole bunch since it initially came out. When it first came out, I hated it. I think I like this movie. I think I do. I will hold the hill I'm going to die on till the day I die. This is the worst scored / soundtracked movie of all time. It is
Really?
the music for this is so wrong in many different places. Like having Hallelujah play during the sex scene is just so awkward, or having Simon and Garfunkel during the funeral. I mean, I could go on. This is just a terribly scored / soundtracked movie. Having said that, though, as I went back and watched it more and more times, I think that Rorschach is such the way that he brings that character to life on screen is like right up there with like how you're supposed to do a character like that, or Batman, you know, because he is like the Watchmen universe's version of Batman. Oh, little side tease. If you haven't, people, go ahead and read Doomsday Clock. It's where the DC universe and the Watchmen universe collide. Really good.
I would just say I thought Night Owl was more Batman, but then Rorschach is like a combination of Batman and The Question, right?
Yeah.
Have I been getting that wrong?
No, you're right. It's because Batman has. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
No, I was just gonna say this movie, Watchmen, definitely makes choices. I think that's what I would say. Even if you like it, don't like it, it definitely makes some choices. Even with what you're talking about with the music, right? It's making choices. It's saying this is what we're doing, and we're gonna do it. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. What do you got at number 2, Andrew?
Oh yeah, we're doing that, aren't we? I forgot. Number 2, I have Boogie Nights.
Yep, definitely had
half
that.
Of this movie takes half of this movie takes place in the 70s. The other half takes place in the 80s. Man, the 70s looked so fun. Everybody was having a great time. And then, boom, William H. Macy brings us into the new decade in a very shocking fashion. And the second half of this movie is rough. The 80s were not good for the porn industry, apparently. You had crazy Alfred Molina coked up. That is one of the most tense scenes in any movie ever. Actually, I think the most tense scene in a movie is actually in my number 1 on our list right here. But the second most is the Alfred Molina, where you have John C. Reilly. I can't remember if Philip Seymour Hoffman was there too. No, he wasn't. That was Thomas Jane. It was John C. Reilly, Thomas Jane, and Marky Mark, who were all sitting on that couch acting all awkward. Well, you have Alfred Molina going crazy. If you would have ever told me that a movie about the porn industry and how it affected in the 70s and 80s would be one of the greatest movies of all time, I'd probably believe you.
My number 2, I couldn't find exactly when this movie is supposed to be set, but it feels like it's set in the 80s to me. So this is where I'm putting Baby Driver on my list.
That is definitely 2000s.
Really?
Yeah, he has an iPod.
They're having modern cars.
You know what? I'm taking it back. I did not consider my choice well enough here.
I do love Baby Driver, but
man, I just wanted to talk about Baby Driver.
Yeah, the soundtrack and the way like he dresses and stuff, that's 80s.
Oh, wait, I misread it. It's actually Ryan Gosling's Drive that I meant to have at number 2.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. That is 80s.
Like I was saying, Drive is an amazing movie, and
that's set in modern times too.
No, it is not. That one's definitely in the 80s.
No,
I thought it was 80s.
No, because remember, during the first heist, he's driving the Honda Civic, that modern Honda Civic, to get away.
That came through like a time portal, though, so it's in the deleted scenes.
Oh, I forget. Time travel.
Fine. Sing Street. Now deal with it.
Wait, was that your number 1? You just dropped down the number?
No. I'm just throwing other movies out there.
Sing Street is in my honorable mentions, though.
Yeah, for sure. I had that in my honorable mentions as well.
Sing Street's my number 1.
Hey! Let's talk about it!
Drive it like you stole it, buddy.
Oh my goodness. Sing Street's one of my favorite. This is in my all-time list. It's like in my top 20. It's my favorite John Carney film, which is saying a lot because John Carney and I, if we could have a conversation, he would get sick of me real fast. Sing Street takes place in 1985, so it's like dead set in the middle. And I'll carry on the theme of like how I watched this. I was 25, and at this point in my life, like I loved music, and I had gone through my 80s phase like a couple of times at this point. My first 80s phase music-wise was when I was a teen, and then a little bit in college. But then Sing Street kind of opened some doors for me when it came to music that came out of the UK and that came out of like Ireland and stuff, because, you know, obviously I'd heard a lot of it, but I didn't have an appreciation for it. I didn't have like the context that this movie gives and puts through the narrative of like this teen who just like, he goes into music for all the wrong reasons, right? Like he just wants to get the, no, I shouldn't say the wrong reasons, for like the reasons you wouldn't expect. Like it's not because he has like a deep passion, you know, for playing an instrument or any raw talent. It's because he wants to get the girl, but then he develops like a passion for music. And that's so great because like there's so many people like that, like me, who come at music from that way in, and it's just so joyful, and how like music is for everybody, and you don't have to be the greatest to have like to leave an impression, and to like let music like enrich your life and change your life. And also the brother plot of it, just
that's what I was gonna bring up.
My goodness. Sing Street for sure, number one.
Yeah, I Can't Fault You, man. I love that movie, and
No,
I was so livid when Drive It Like You Stole It was not nominated for best song.
Oh, ridiculous.
Because
it's a good song. That's
insanely good song.
Sing Street's great. That's why I had it at number 2. You know, Drive It Like You Stole It.
I get it.
That's what I was saying. Baby, drive it like you stole it. Number 1 for you, Andrew?
Aaron, John, what is the most you've ever lost on a coin toss?
This was my number 1 as well. So
I had a feeling. Yeah, No Country for Old Men is such a terrifying movie. This came out in 2007, and I can't remember which one came out first. It was either this or There Will Be Blood. They came out really close to each other.
I know, same here, yeah.
Yeah, it was only within like a couple months of each other. And both of those movies are actually in my top 10 movies of all time, right next to each other. And I keep going back and forth which one I like more. I think that No Country for Old Men has the better story, while I think that There Will Be Blood has the better performances. That's not to take anything away from Javier Bardem, because Anton Chigurh is one of the most terrifying villains of all time. What I was talking about earlier is the gas station scene. What's the most you've ever lost on a coin toss? Being what I consider the most tense, like white knuckle inducing scenes in any movie, because there's no reason for him to show that type of animosity to the old man. And you just feel like, please, you have a 50-50 chance. Please just let the guy go. Let the guy go. And he's talking about how the coin traveled 22 years to get here, and now it's here. And it's kind of like a great analogy for the movie, you know, like Josh Brolin's character had been, you know, doing welding and stuff like that for 22 years. And then he finds that money, and now he is here. Anton Chigurh is here. It got to the same place, or they met up at the same place that the coin did. It's such a good movie. Man, I love the Coen brothers. This is unlike any Coen brothers movie out there, really. Like, I think a lot of Coen brothers movies have like a really comedic element to them, you know, like you could look at even their serious movies. Fargo has a lot of funny moments in it, you know?
Yeah.
Sure.
There's not much. There's not much that you can, if anything, that you can laugh at in No Country for Old Men. But it's good. Aaron, tell me why I'm right.
Because you know all, and you are the one who has the information. No, you said everything I wanted to say. I feel like we've talked this movie to death. It ends up on a lot of our lists, and that's because it's a great movie. And I am with you on the Coen brothers. I tend to go more for their funny movies. It's not my favorite Coen brothers movie. I have several actually Coens that I like more than this, but it is still a fabulous film, and is in my top 100 of all time. So it's not a surprise that it would be up at the top of this list for me.
Yeah.
All right, some honorable mentions. Before we get to those, I will mention in the chat, people are throwing out things like Donnie Darko, which I think is a decent choice.
You know my feelings on that movie.
Yeah. Somebody found out that Rocky V is set in 1985 and was filmed in 1990, so they want to include Rocky V in the discussion as well.
I knew Tommy Morrison, who was the guy he fought in Rocky V.
Oh, like his protege?
Yeah. Yeah, Tommy Morrison was an actual boxer. Good guy.
Buck Hoovian says Back to the Future 3 was set in the 1880s. Does that count? Well, no, because it was filmed in the 1980s.
Filmed in the 80s.
So,
Yeah.
so it does not count.
That's funny, though.
Nice thought. Cool Runnings was mentioned. That's a fun one.
Jamaica has a
lots,
bobsled team.
lots of good stuff in there. Other honorable mentions, I'll just throw out mine, and then Andrew, if you've got some, or John, if you've got some, you can throw those out
I
as
got
well.
a bunch. So go ahead.
I had question marks on some of these just because, as we've already indicated, I obviously don't know when things are set in, but these feel like 80s movies to me, if nothing else. Cabin in the Woods has a very 80s feel to me. So I wanted to mention that. Wet Hot American Summer. Do we know for sure that happens in the 80s? Or
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh
so
yeah. That's in my honorable mentions.
Yeah, that's definitely one worth mentioning. The Wedding Singer, Adam Sandler. Adventureland is worth mentioning. People probably want us to mention Wolf of Wall Street. Probably a good one to mention. Lots of that takes place in the 80s.
Oh man, that would have made my top 5 probably.
Let's see, Eddie the Eagle. I was surprised you didn't mention Eddie the Eagle.
I thought that was 70s. Was that 80s?
I believe that was the 80s. Yeah,
Man.
So,
Yeah.
but don't trust
you know
me.
how much I love that movie.
I thought Baby Driver was the 80s, so don't trust me. I, Tonya, It, I think is worth mentioning.
Yep. I'll mark that one off.
Straight Outta Compton, I thought was worth mentioning as well. A lot of that takes place in the 80s. That's pretty much all. Oh, Romy and Michelle, I think, is one worth mentioning that a lot of people don't think about. Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, I think, is a really fun comedy that a lot of people have overlooked.
I don't think I know that one.
You can look it up. John, did you have any other honorable mentions you wanted to throw out there?
Dang, well, you guys mentioned almost all of them. No Country for Old Men, of course. Wolf of Wall Street was one. Adventureland, that's a very formative movie for me. Wet Hot American Summer, of course. The only one that you guys, I have two that you did mention. One of them is Class Action Park, which technically it's a documentary, but like a lot of that is footage of the 80s, right? So
Yep.
like
It's a great doc.
Today, sort of. I don't know if that counts, but that has the spirit of the 80s through and through. Also, I did have one that kind of cheated with the 1880s thing. I put down True History of the Kelly Gang. I think that partly takes place in the early, the mid 1800s, but then part of the movie's in the 1880s. And that movie, if you haven't seen it, came out earlier this year, and it's one of my top 20. So I
Nice.
really, really responded to it.
Nice. Andrew, did you have any others?
Just two more. Pursuit of Happiness. Watch Will Smith just say, "Give me my Oscar," and they said no.
Yeah. He said that a few times, and they've continued to say no.
Say no. I think that Pursuit of Happiness is a very powerful and emotional movie about never giving up. No matter how many times you get knocked down, it just takes one more time to stand up. It's a very powerful movie. I love it. And then the other one that I would mention is the beginning of the reconnaissance, and that would be Dallas Buyers Club.
Fair enough. Yep. Good choices all. We are there. It's time for our buried treasure, guys. What's that one thing in any area of pop culture you want to make sure other people know about? I'll start us off. I've been on a Billy Wilder kick. I have very much, for a movie lover, been lacking in my Billy Wilder, and that is something I am trying to rectify over the last couple weeks. And saw for the first time what many consider to be his best, I believe. I know it ranks really highly in the all-time rankings, but finally got around to seeing The Apartment.
Oh,
and
that's the one I
my
thought you were going to
favorite
say.
movie of all time. This is my number one.
Nice.
Billy Wilder is my favorite director, along with him and Richard Linklater.
I get it now. And not only is he so talented, and the movies he makes are so good, he makes so many different kinds of movies, and it's really incredible to look through his career as I've been doing, and I feel very much like I have ignored something that I really should be held accountable for. Like there should be some punishment for me not having watched Billy Wilder movies up until this point. The Apartment is great. It's so good, and I fell in love with both of them in this movie. Like Tony Curtis is so good in this movie. And
Jack Lemmon.
I'm sorry, I said Tony. I meant Jack Lemmon.
Some Like It Hot, Tony Curtis. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Yes, that's what I was thinking. And it's just what I love about this movie is it's just perfect. Like, I don't know how you make this movie better. Like,
No
there's
flaws.
no scene that can be cut. There's no line that's not exactly what it needs to be. There's no moment that's not perfectly captured. There's no relationship that doesn't feel, like the intricacy of this plot is matched only by its authenticity. Like, I was blown away by this movie. And, so yeah, I wanted to let people know, if you, like me, have forsook some of the greatest directors, take some time to catch up, and this is definitely one you're going to want to catch up on. Yeah, I was blown away by how modern this movie feels too. Just
Yeah.
the fact, I think it's 1960, I think is when it came out.
Yeah, 1960, and it's like the themes of it, everything, like it totally still works today. Like
Yeah.
everything it's trying to say, and even some of the like the gender relationships and all the story around that is like totally relevant. It's timeless.
Yeah, and Fred McMurray, like if your only experience with him is through Disney movies, then after you check out Double Indemnity #1, check out
Yes.
The Apartment #2.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff going on in this movie. So that's so fun that it's your #1 favorite movie of all time.
I watch it every year around Christmas time.
Oh,
'cause
that's
it is
really
a
cool.
Christmas movie.
Every movie is, if you try hard enough. I did think it's funny. Like I watched probably 4 movies in the course of 2 days that had people singing Old Lang Syne in it, including The Apartment and It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I can't forget what the fourth was, but that song
Elf?
is everywhere in movies. What's that?
Doesn't Elf have that?
It might have been Elf. It
think at the
really
very
might have been. So anyhow, huge recommend. Check out The Apartment. What do you got, Andrew?
I'm gonna go with a selfish plug.
Do it, man.
Believe it or not, Aaron, I kind of started doing YouTube again, but not in the way
Nice.
that I used to. You know me. I love Dungeons and Dragons, and I decided, why don't I just, because we finished our last campaign. I think I remember bringing that up. After 2 years, we finally finished it, and we started a new one. So I started recording the audio and the visuals from that, and I started uploading it on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/flickfreaks, you will see the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is the new campaign that we have started. It is a lot of fun, and a little content warning. This show we do here is pretty family friendly, get kids involved. My show, not so much. Not so much. It's yeah.
Thanks for the warning.
That's
Thanks
good.
for the
Yeah.
warning.
But if you are like curious about like how D&D works and stuff, I think we go into a lot more detail than say something like Harmon Quest or NADPOD, which I think really focuses more on the entertainment aspect of it, like just to, make it seem fun and not really showing you the mechanics, where I think is we don't hold back because the mechanics can be fun. So
Very
that's
good.
my plug. The Ghosts of Saltmarsh.
I'll have to
Nice.
check that out. I love Dungeons and Dragons, so that looks like a easy thing for me to get on.
Nice.
There you go.
John, what do you got for your buried treasure?
All right, this was a tough one because I really thought about going down the video game route. Because last time I went anime, I was like trying to be different, but I was thinking more about it, and I was like, everybody knows about this video game. I was going to mention the new Spider-Man one, but it's like
The Miles Morales game? Yeah.
it's like it doesn't need any plugs for me. Are you kidding? So I'm going to plug something that I do hope gets way more attention. It's a movie that just came out. It's on Amazon Prime, but like I think because of Soul and Wonder Woman and Promised Young Woman and like all these like big movies coming out, it's kind of getting buried. But Sylvie's Love, which, oh my goodness, this is the new Eugene Ash film with Tessa Thompson and kind of a newcomer. I didn't know him as well, but Nnamdi Asomugha, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is like a sweeping throwback romance. Talk about films like set in the past. That is classic Hollywood, just but with like a modern directorial feel. I had the absolute privilege to see this at Sundance, so I got to see it on the big screen. And I don't know how it translates yet to like a smaller screen, but if you have a great setup, the sound design in this movie is just absolutely gorgeous. And, I think, don't go into it thinking this is going to be your movie of 2020 necessarily. It's not that deep or, there's a lot of things about it that are very like simple and like surface level in terms of like a romance set, in the, like, I think if I recall correctly, it's like the 1940s, 50s. I don't remember exactly. That said, though, it's just a pleasure to like watch this thing and like get swept up into that era again. And it's a great distraction. If you want something that's not gonna like, if you're not in the mood for something like too introspective or like something too complicated, if you just want like a nice, comforting throwback watch, Sylvie's Love. It's like out right now, and it really is a joy to watch.
Very nice.
Great cast I'm looking at.
Yeah, Sylvie's Love on Amazon Prime, if you want to check that out. Before we finish out, I did also want to mention I have fully embraced the letterbox the last couple weeks. I've taken the time to upload, because I didn't know there was an import feature. I've imported my annual spreadsheets that I do for my movie diary, and so now I have a complete letterbox. I'm also in the midst of uploading updates to my favorite 41 movies of the year for the past 20 years. So if you want to check those out, you can check out my letterbox. It's Aaron Dicer. John, I think you're on letterbox as well. I think I saw you hanging out over there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find you right now. I didn't know you were on the LB. Let's go. Let's follow each other. I'll try to find
Let's
you.
do it. So I've fully embraced
I didn't know
it.
you could follow people on Letterboxd.
Yeah, it's very much a movie social network. That's what it is.
I just use it to make lists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the lists are nice, and the diary is really, really nice. And the fact that I can just upload my spreadsheets that sealed it for me. So I've give me a follow. I've been trying to follow some people back as well. So just kind of have the community going there on Letterboxd. That'll do it. We did a podcast, guys. We managed to make it happen. Congratulations to us for all our efforts and work.
Proud of you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Sif Pop is part of the Studio DNA podcast network. You can find out more about other shows on the network at studiodna.media, or you can search Studio DNA in your podcast player. Huge thanks to Andrew for hanging out again today.
Think about it.
Huge thanks to producer Phil for producing the audio and video show.
That's Phil.
Thanks to Drew for putting together all the graphics and such.
Golf clap.
And a big thanks to John Negroni for joining us as guest this week. John, go ahead and plug away, man. Where do you want people to find you? What do you got going on in the world right now?
You can find me on Twitter at John Negroni. That's like where everything I have is showing up. And podcast-wise, you can check out Cinemaholics if you want to hear more of what I have to say about new films. Cinemaholics podcast. Or just go to our website, cinemaholics.com. We also have like written reviews and stuff too. So definitely check it out. It's a fun time.
Well, we appreciate you being here, man, and glad to have you on again. Hopefully we'll be able to do so again in the future. You can support what goes on at Sif Pop by becoming a Sif Pop member. It starts at $3 a month. You get access to all the bonus episodes, as well as some other fun perks. You can find out more at patreon.com/SifPop. Lots of ways to connect with us. You can email us at feedback@sifpop.com. You can also leave comments, rate the podcast, leave a review at Apple Podcasts, wherever that you listen. And finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like the show too, so make sure you let them know about it, and that listening is much easier than getting a haircut from someone whose soul is trapped in the body of an animal. We will be back next week with another special guest, and I think we're going to chat news of the world in the midnight sky, so we will see you then.
Bye.
Thank you to our video watchers, the live stream watchers. We appreciate you guys. We're gonna
David, that's gonna be buried treasure next week. So
season 9 of Letterkenny.
Yeah.
Nice.
I watched it all today.
We appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out for the live show. We're gonna book it because we've got a couple spoiler episodes to record of Wonder Woman and Soul, and so we're gonna do that real quick, and we'll catch you next week.